The soft glow of the morning sunlight's rays shot through the crumpled and bent blinds that covered the window to the dingy room, hitting the young man in the face. The young man groaned a bit before shifting a little in his bed, attempting to get back to sleep. This, however, was short-lived, before the sound of the alarm clock blaring from a dusty nightstand next to his bed interrupted it. Fine, I'll get up, the young man moaned out, before slamming his fist onto the blaring device with so much force that it cracked the screen in two. Tom simply sat up in his bed, before turning to look at the clock that had, just moments ago, woken him up from his peaceful slumber. He simply slapped his face lightly, completely agitated with himself over the fact that he had hit the clock too hard. Again. With as much care as he could give, he picked up the clock and stared at the cracked screen. Yep, it was definitely busted, all right. If the cracked and shattered screen didn't already give it away, and the soft buzzing sound coming from the destroyed speakers definitely proved it. Throwing the now useless device down onto the ground in a huff, Tom turned his body around and hopped off the bed, before reaching over towards the plug of the clock and yanking it out of the wall, nearly pulling the entire outlet in the process. Looks like I'll have to be getting another one of these damn things again, Tom muttered to himself before wrapping the device up and throwing it into an overflowing bin next to the chair. Looking around the room, the young fish noticed that the room itself looked a lot dirtier than how it did yesterday. Various empty cans of soda littered the floor, along with the mountains of chocolate bar wrappers piled up next to them. Various flies and the like circled around each and every empty wrapper, attempting to try and fill their tiny stomachs with whatever sweet morsels that hadn't been licked clean. This, despite the disgusting smell and the flies that flooded the room, Fred's stomach started to growl at the same time. In fact, with the soft growls came a sudden craving, and a slight pain that radiated throughout his entire being. Tom's face contorted a bit in pain as he grasped his stomach and groaned. Then, without another word said, he quickly made his way over towards his kitchen and flung open the refrigerator. A swift feeling of slight relief filled the young fish's body, as he smiled and reached into the cool air-filled icebox, grabbing a box and then immediately pulling it out. Upon closing the door to the fridge, he carefully placed the box onto the dirty kitchen counter and ripped it open. Inside, there lay the perfect, rectangular, individually wrapped bars of chocolate of various flavors and colors. The young fish grinned wildly before grabbing the bars and running to his recliner chair in the living room to enjoy his breakfast for the day, as well as some television. However, as he sat down on the musty recliner, his eyes caught the sight of a few folds of a few envelopes buried underneath another pile of chocolate bar wrappers. He was actually surprised that he even noticed them at all. Brushing away the wrappers, which in turn hit him with the foul odor of spoiled chocolate and maggots, he looked at the small pile of mail that he had neglected to even open the first time around. With the exception of the brown splotches from the various confectionaries that stained the envelope, Fred could easily read what they were. His heart sank to the bottom of his chest when he saw what they were. Bills. Many, many bills. Most of which were long overdue, which would explain the lack of proper AC flowing in his home during the past week or so. Tom looked at the bills for a good long while, his entire mind going from excited to depressed in the span of only a few seconds. As he continued to look at the envelopes, the slight pain that had interrupted him earlier came back, but this time with a sharper feeling to it that jammed into his empty stomach like a blade being slowly shoved into his stomach. In a fit, Tom immediately slapped away the bills off of the coffee table, which helped dull the pain only slightly, as he reclined back into his seat with his breakfast. Drool started to pour out of his mouth as he pulled out one of the bars of chocolate from the box and began to unwrap it. Caramel cream. This one was his personal favorite. Taking a large bite out of the sweet confectionery, his mind burst with a feeling of pure bliss and temporary nirvana. The pain itself completely subsided, being replaced with a large hit of dopamine flowing into his brain. Fred simply savored the first bar of chocolate, but then began eating it faster. He then moved on to the next bar, and the next, and the next, shoving nearly 2 pounds worth of chocolate down his gullet, before finally finishing. Man, that was awesome, Tom said to himself as he tossed the box and wrappers aside, having every intention of bagging it up in a trash bag and taking it out, only to forget later in the evening and completely neglect it. Tom didn't even want to leave the comfort of his old cozy recliner. It felt too good to even remotely move a muscle, much less get up. The feeling didn't last too long, though, as he soon felt the uncomfortable stickiness all over his hands from the chocolate, not to mention that it had been smeared all over his clothes as well. Sighing, the young fish got up and began to make his way over towards the bathroom to freshen up for the day. As he walked, a sudden flash of fear filled his eyes as he looked down at his wristwatch. "Oh my God, I'm late for work!" Tom screamed, nearly on the verge of another panic attack. However, another quick glance of his watch revealed that it was the weekend, and that he didn't have to work during the weekends at all. A wave of relief came over Tom, as his rapid pacing slowed back to his normal speed. Getting a fresh set of clothes from a drawer in the bathroom and placing them next to the sink, Tom disrobed and began to run himself a hot shower to wake himself up. Upon getting into the now steaming bathtub, Fred began the routine that every other person in the town did. Shampoo his hair, conditioner, body wash, etc. The simple route. However, right in the middle of the lather, his mind began to fill with thoughts. Thoughts that he hated listening to. Thoughts that demeaned him, devalued him, made him feel like crap. This, like many other weekends in the past, had been the standard fare that he would go through throughout the day. "You're a disgusting disgrace," one voice would yell out. "Is chocolate all you think about?" another would say. "You're going to die fat and alone if you don't do something about this now," another would chime in. Looking down at the bits of chocolate that hadn't been washed out of his hands, another wave of guilt flooded his mind. He knew that what the voices in his head were telling him were true. He was a disgrace, and he knew it. It wasn't always this way. In fact, Tom was a relatively decent kid growing up. Good grades, decent social life, hell, even a girlfriend that would have been his wife now, had he not allowed his addiction to chocolate to take over his body like it did now. As the hot water pelted itself onto his skin, his mind began to go back to the day that the whole thing started. One day in the city, with nothing else more to do than to enjoy his birthday money for his 13th birthday, and then he stumbled across the candy store. That damned candy store. It wasn't a very well-known candy shop in the city, but for Tom, it was pure heaven to him. Candy of various sizes and shapes all littered aisle after aisle with their sugary goodness. He had went down every single aisle there, but found nothing that really caught his interest, until the owner of the store, Candy Kevin as he called himself, showed him a VIP room filled with 4 chocolates from all over the world. Kevin had even told young Tom that he could have as much as he liked, since his birthday had just passed the day before, and the fact that he hadn't been getting a whole lot of business in his shop recently. So that's what the young Tom did. He ate, and ate, and ate some more. until he nearly vomited out a thick, chunky, brownish bile in the restroom. Upon making his way out of the restroom, Tom was given a few extra boxes filled with the various treats that he had been enjoying by Kevin himself. He said that it was, quote, on the house for this day only. Of course, Tom didn't have any intention, at least not at the time, to eat any more of it, due to him being particularly sick that day. However, like with every addiction, his craving for chocolate came back, ever so slowly. It would start with a simple chocolate treat from his stash after dinner, as a bit of a dessert, or for the occasional trip to the candy store for a chocolate bar after school. It was, in his mind at the time, a relatively harmless little treat that he would enjoy every so often. But as the weeks went on, his craving for the chocolate confectionaries only became more and more common. Soon, it stopped becoming an occasional treat and wound up becoming his meals, whether it be at school or at home. And to add that, he would take whatever allowance he had earned from doing his chores and began to waste it all on packs of chocolate at the candy store. Weeks passed, and he even went so far to steal money from his mother's purse to feed his chocolate cravings. This had alerted his mother, and she, being the one that loved and cared for him the most, tried as hard as she could to restrict Tom of his chocolate addiction that was slowly taking him over. How did he respond to that? Well, it wasn't something that he was proud of. Whenever his mother would confront him about his habits, or try and take the candy away from him, he would scream at first, and then yell, and then insult her, oftentimes saying awful and insulting things to his mother to the point where, in the end of the argument, she would be on the floor sobbing, while the young Tom would simply take the treats back to his room and eat them without any kind of remorse. It was a horrible thing that he did, and just the thought alone made hot tears flow down his eyes that mixed in with the now lukewarm shower water that was pouring onto his head at a rapid pace. His mother, out of all the people in his life, loved him more than anything, and he wished he could honestly go back and apologize to her for all the things that he had done and all the things that he had said. But alas, he wasn't anywhere close to where she was now currently residing, which was the old folks' home. And even if he did have the time and the money to go down there and apologize, his mother wouldn't even know what he'd be talking about, due to severe dementia taking over her body relatively early in her life, hence the reason why she was in the home to begin with. Despite the awful way that he had treated her during his youth, Tom's mother still didn't give up and attempted to try and help her son in any way possible. Counseling, family support, various interventions, hell, even doctor visits. But nothing worked. And whatever did wind up working was very temporary before he would go back to whatever it was that he was doing. And most of the time, the only thing that would occur was Tom becoming violent, screaming chocolate over and over again. If he was even a few hours away from the stuff, he would react this way. This went on for years before his mother, after consulting other family members, and with a greatly heavy heart, hesitantly kicked him out of the house when he had reached the age of 18, which at the time didn't bother Tom too much. However, his addiction soon started to take over him once more, and he knew that he had to find a way to get to it, which ultimately led him to do something rather unorthodox, at least in his situation. He got a job, worked his way up, and actually managed to be successful, at least financially, that is. However, despite his stable career at his job, his home, and all his belongings that he owned, he was an addict. A high-functioning chocolate addict, but still an addict. Chocolate was his life, and it seemed like things would only continue to go down that path if he didn't do something quick. Unfortunately for him, though, there really wasn't much he could do. He was completely and utterly hooked to the stuff, and there was nothing that could be done for him to ever get him off of it. And that was that. Nothing could ever take him out of this addiction. Nothing. Wiping the tears from his eyes, as well as all the soap, Tom immediately turned the water off and stepped out of the shower, dried himself off, got himself dressed, and then cleaned himself up a bit. He may have been a complete slob at home, but God forbid he act like a slob in public. At least when he wasn't stuffing his face full of chocolate at the local candy store or the ice cream parlor across town. Upon exiting the bathroom and placing his dirty clothes and a towel into a washing machine to be cleaned later, Tom began to make his way back over towards his recliner, but not before checking the fridge for any more chocolate, only to find at least a few bars of it. Tom started to panic. He was getting very, very, very low, and he certainly wasn't going to be getting paid anytime soon. He had taken many days off of work, and he knew that it would greatly affect his financial stability. This started to overwhelm him, and he decided to go back to his recliner to relax a little bit and think things through. However, before plopping himself onto the chair for yet another day of doing nothing, there was a knock at the door. I wonder who that could be, Tom said to himself as he got up and made his way over towards the front door and opened it up. What he saw surprised him. Standing next to the front door were a pair of Bikini Bottomites, who were very well known in the area, SpongeBob SquarePants and his friend, Patrick Star. He would have said something to the two of them, very likely a greeting, but SpongeBob was the one who initiated the conversation first. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to buy some chocolate?" the sponge said, holding up a bar of the chocolate confectionery. Tom simply looked down at the treat held up right in front of him, and his stomach began to growl silently as the pangs of hunger and craving started to slowly fill his body like water. "Chocolate? Did you say chocolate?" Tom said, a bit more aggressively at the last bit, as his need for the candy bar started to simmer to an entire boil. "Yes, sir, with or without nuts," the pink starfish called out, holding out 2 bars of the addictive cocoa product. The craving for the delectable bars of goodness came to a head. The wave of hunger mixed in with desire and cravings all came as Tom's sanity loosened more and more. "Chocolate? Chocolate? Chocolate!" Tom screamed out as the pain in his stomach returned, sharper and more vile than before. His sanity had finally dwindled away, and before he knew it, he was screaming out the words chocolate while chasing the two all across town. This chase went on for the rest of the day, until Tom had finally caught up with the two. After seeing them dejected and bored out of their minds on an abandoned street, the final yell out of the words chocolate had caused the 2 poor sea creatures to cower before the now insane fish that stood before them. Tom himself, while completely insane, saw the look of fear on their faces, and just as he was about to snap even more, he quickly calmed himself down and then offered to buy all of their chocolate, which the two seemed to be okay with. Upon returning home, Tom was filled to the brim with pure glee. Box after box after box of chocolate decorated his living room like a candy shop. "Yes, I finally have it all. I don't need to get any more chocolate for as long as I live," Tom yelled out before dancing like crazy in the middle of his living room for a solid hour, before he suddenly stopped himself. His face, what once was the face of glee and enjoyment, quickly fell into one of complete and utter grief, guilt, and pure shame. He had lost it. He had lost his mind. Over what? A few boxes of chocolate? After the realization kicked in for the second time that day, Tom simply fell to his knees and began to bitterly weep at all the trouble and fear that he had caused that day. Not just to the 2 poor Bikini Bottomites, SpongeBob and Patrick. those two poor people who were just simply there to sell him a product, but also to the rest of the Bikini Bottomites for scaring them as well, as he chased the two around town screaming and chanting like a madman. This combined with the feelings of guilt from earlier with his mother, his family, and everything that he had ultimately neglected, were all too much for him to handle, and he simply bawled like a newborn baby in its mother's arms. He hated himself. He hated what he had become. He hated that something as simple as a simple little treat had managed to make him into something completely ugly, inside and out. After some time, Tom wiped the tear and snot-stained face and made his way over towards one of the boxes of chocolate that he had purchased from the two and opened it up. For the next few hours, he simply shoveled down bar after bar of chocolate down his gullet, all the while crying as he did so. This was the last time he was going to let this addiction take over him. This was the last time he would hurt anyone because of his lack of wanting to change. This was the last time he had ever been a burden to anyone ever again. He continued to eat the remaining contents of the boxes before his entire body began to shake violently. Before he even took another bite, he fell to the ground, convulsing rapidly, his heart beating wildly and violently, faster than what a normal fish's heart rate would be. Then, in nearly an instant of it happening, everything stopped. Tom, now barely breathing, could feel his heart become slower and slower as the seconds went by. He was dying. Whether it was from the stress eating or the heavy amount of sugar in his system, he didn't know. But it didn't matter to him. It would all be over soon, and he would be at peace once again, free from the addiction, free from the pain of waking up each and every single day only to devour chocolate, free from the awful chocolate itself, finally free at last. The final beat of his heart was the last thing that he heard before he closed his eyes, with a small smile on his face. He was ready for a good night rest, for all eternity, at the gates of heaven itself. In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping portrait, nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.